Hello and welcome to the Guitar Hang Podcast. I'm your host, John Stancorp. Today I'm diving deep into the incredible world of musical genius Mike Keneally. You know Mike from his extraordinary journey, including collaborations with legends like Frank Zappa, Steve Vai, and Joe Satriani, as well as his own band Beer for Dolphins. Mike has released a staggering 11 solo albums, each one a testament to his immense talent and creativity. Join me for an exclusive journey through his remarkable career, creative adventures, and his boundless passion that fuels his musical endeavors. Please make sure you hit the subscribe button below and ring the bell for notifications. And now, let's hang with Mike Keneally. Welcome back, world-weary traveler.
Weary traveler. I'm still jet lagged after a week at home.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would think it takes a while to kind of decompress and that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely from Australian time zone differences between there and here, but also I feel like I'm decompressing from the year because my year's touring schedule is officially done, and I think it's I'm feeling all of it.
Yeah, as one of your fans, we're always excited to see where we might see you. You know, in terms of whether it would be with Devin Townsend or with Joe or the past with Steve, or with one of your own groups, or I haven't been able to catch One Shot Deal yet, but I'm very excited about one of these days catching a show at the Potato.
Yeah, that's the three that we did a couple of weeks ago were just fantastic, and so I guess I had sat in with them once before in San Pedro. And I love playing with that band. And in fact, I just spoke to Joe Travers yesterday about doing more next year. So and also we're lining up some Beer for Dolphins stuff. Where are you located?
I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. I was raised in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay.
And
because I do have a couple of Beer for Dolphins shows at the Potato in January that haven't actually been announced yet, although I'm going to announce
Will
them
it
this
be
week.
Roughly around the time of NAMM or not so much?
Yeah, well, it's January 19 and 20.
Okay.
So that's roughly around the time. I think that's just before NAMM starts.
Yeah. It was at one time I was going to staying in Studio City once a month. We're doing a weekend thing once a month in the downtown LA at the Wisdom in the Arts District, where I perform with the Pink Floyd tribute here. But I would fly out there, and Scott Page and some other folks that toured with Pink Floyd, we would do this show in this immersive video thing, which was actually the precursor to what they're doing at the Sphere with U2.
Okay.
Yeah, it was very, very cool. Very strange, though, to be singing and playing the Floyd stuff and have this immersive video. It was very easy to get distracted. And the audience not facing you, they're laying back, looking up.
Okay, that's unusual.
Yeah, but I really enjoyed coming to Studio City and getting to catch, Mike Landau at the Potato or whomever.
Yeah, God.
Just so many great players to see.
I just played with Scott Page at the Mint in LA with the band that I've been doing a lot of touring with, and I'm going to do a lot more with next year, which is called Project, which is that's the brainchild of Jonathan Mover, who used to be the Satriani's drummer. Yeah. And it's also got Ryo Okamoto on keyboards, who used to play and still does play in Spock's Beard. So we toured for 2 months this year and looking to do more of it next year. But Scott sat in with us, and he's so great. Amazing energy, amazing player. He's so cool.
Yes. Yeah, he's very passionate about non-musical things that he really gets into that will pull you into some interesting conversations. So that
I like your George Harrison Strat back there.
Yeah, it's my Rocky Strat. You know who got a big kick out of it is my pal Rob Fetters from the Raisins.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, he's a huge George Harrison fan, and
of course he is.
Yeah, as we all are. In fact, his band is getting together to do kind of a 40-year reunion or something like that since they last played in Cincinnati. They're doing like 3 nights at the Woodward Theater.
Which band is that?
I think you've heard of the group The Raisins from
So
Cincinnati.
yeah, so this is probably going to be a tribute to Chris, our producer as well.
Yeah, so you knew Chris. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sweet guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Bob Neiswanger put on a benefit show. I guess it was a couple weeks back, but I live in Raleigh, North Carolina now, so I kind of heard about it late, but it was, yeah, just super sad to hear. He was,
Of course it was. Yeah. No, he was wonderful.
yeah. I did you hear his grave blankets project that he had? Or
No, unfortunately.
yeah, he's
Something I'm sure it's something I should hear.
yeah, it's great stuff. But yeah, so I'm really looking forward to hearing One Shot Deal, and um, it's just so exciting that when you guys are still keeping that. It's one of the, as we get older and we're losing friends and musicians or both,
Hmm.
and this music is, it it would be hard to imagine it not being performed and getting out there more, because it really needs to, and it's such a delicate thing because there's only a handful of players that really can. It's one thing to play the music, but you guys can put the eyebrows on it.
Well, I mean, it's like playing this stuff with Travers, especially. Joe Travers, who, in addition to being the drummer, is also the vaultmeister.
Right.
So, and with him at the helm, it really feels like that Zappa is still an ongoing concern and not just a thing from the past. I was just listening to the Overnight Sensation box that just came out, and it's still, there's still that thrill of discovery and the excitement of piecing clues together and discovering things that you didn't. Oh, that like that song makes more sense now that I understand its evolution.
Yeah.
And also just live concerts, just an endless supply thanks to Frank's obsession with recording as much as humanly possible, which we're all very grateful for now.
Yeah.
But playing that music with Joe, because he's so, he's I am, obviously I love Frank's music and I love to play it correctly, but I'm also not super religious in that regard. And Joe doesn't insist that things sound exactly like the records, texturally or sonically, but he definitely wants to make sure that the notes are correct. So things are at a very high standard with One Shot Deal, and of course everybody in the band is incredibly capable, and everyone knows how the songs go, so it's good.
Yeah, you and Jamie and Sheila and Joe and I mean, yeah. It is a thing that it's a given that you guys will be able to replicate the stuff, but you have such a familiarity from the inside.
Yeah.
Joe not necessarily playing with Frank, but certainly you with playing with Frank and having the same. You guys bring the humor and the attitude and the spirit of it, rather than just making it a very stiff replication of.
Sure. But and Joe, just from the past 2 decades or whatever it's been of just like completely steeped in the vault and listening to all this stuff, he's definitely as well positioned as anyone to bring the attitude. So it's great. It's great fun,
Yeah,
exhilarating.
I was talking to Andy Aladort, and he was
Love that guy.
something, yeah, great guy, and he was talking about transcribing, well, or what led him to transcribe Hot Rats and Overnight Sensation, and I guess One Size Fits All,
I
perhaps.
think he did One Size Fits All. Yeah.
But there was a question that came up about this particular passage, and it was Rollo or something,
Oh
and
yeah.
he had called Steve, and I think Steve said, "You better call Mike." And he
Yeah, he
called.
texted me about that a few months ago. We went back and forth.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
he's
he
he's
said, and that he knew that you would, and sure enough, you. And I was wondering, is because we kind of got off topic. Was Rollo the thing that Ruth was demonstrating on that video with, it's got all the sus two chords in it?
um
That's something.
I think it was, although it's been so
Yeah,
long since I've seen that in my head.
yeah,
I have a recollection of being Black Page, but it might have been Rollo. But that was on the Overnight Sensation apostrophe DVD, right?
Yeah.
In which case, it's more likely that it was Rollo, because that ended up being in a part of St. Alfonso.
Yeah, I think that's how that came up with Saint Al. We were talking about Saint Alfonso's, and um, but it's that conceptual continuity thing that's very exciting. To all these
Right.
things seem wildly dissimilar, but there's a through line to it, and the more you get into it, the more interesting and exciting it is. And especially
there's a lot of DNA to be traced in all of that stuff.
Yeah, and you guys certainly know that better than anybody in terms of I mean, because you were a kid essentially, right? You were in San Diego. You were probably 10 or 12 when you discovered Frank.
I was 9 when I first heard "Help I'm a Rock," which was really the thing that pushed me off of the shore in terms of becoming obsessed. So yeah, I was into it from a very young age.
And was the piano your primary instrument? And
organ. Yeah, but keyboard, yes. But yeah, I had gotten an organ for my birthday when I was 7, and then 4 years later for my birthday, I got a acoustic guitar. So I had 4 years on keyboard before the guitar showed up.
Did you find that did you take to it pretty well because your ear was already fairly well? You were able to discern certain things, not necessarily.
Yeah, and I didn't know that to be the case at the time, but I think my parents did. They sussed out that I probably would have an affinity for it. So, and I had never really thought about playing, but when I on my 7th birthday, when I rounded the corner and saw that they had an organ there, I didn't even question it. I instantly walked up to it and started picking out melodies. I remember, very early on picking out the melody to "Paint It Black" by the Rolling Stones, which was pretty easy to work out on a keyboard because it's just sort of up and down. But yeah, because the guitar, I mean the keyboard is so chromatic, it was very easy for me to like find my way in the world of music. It's hard to imagine a better interface for music making than a keyboard. And I think it helped me out a lot a few years later when I started playing guitar, the ability to, because essentially what I did was look at each string on the guitar as a separate keyboard starting on a different note. If you look at it that way, it's like a series of 6 sequential keyboards laid end to end. And that helped me find my way around the fretboard a little more readily than if I hadn't had any musical training at all. And I never had any guitar lessons. I was only ever trained as a keyboardist. So it was a question early on of I would gain some kind of knowledge on the keyboard and then just transfer that over to the guitar as best as I could. So it was the two things were running simultaneously in terms of development. Yeah.
Since I think we're probably essentially contemporaries, roughly about the same age. I'm 58, so I'm not exactly sure.
Roughly, I'm about, next month I'll be 62. So yeah, we're in the same ballpark.
So when even though I didn't play until much later, the period of time that we came up in, especially with AM radio, it was so diverse in what you were likely to hear. You could hear a Carpenter's tune, then you might hear Glenn Campbell's
Blood Rock.
Yeah, it was a wide mix of stuff, but at its core, the songs were fantastic. I mean, structurally and some of the harmonically, they were interesting. Melodically, they were interesting, but it was a diverse palette. So it was great to be exposed to the Beach Boys, but then you might hear a Miles Davis thing on AM radio. You didn't know what you were going to hear, but it really informed you didn't put up these walls with music.
Yeah, and it was also entirely desegregated too, so that you could hear any number of kinds of music next to one another, and it was all very influential and really exciting, and really good. So my brother and I were just talking about this yesterday. Is that we were thinking about how a lot of in the 70s when we were both sort of prog snobs, and there were a lot of hit songs that were coming out that we kind of belittled at the time for being overly simplistic or something. You hear any of them now they sound amazing. It's like everyone is playing so well, and it's like it took years to really begin to appreciate what is required to make, like, the engine that makes like You Make Love and Fun by
Right.
Fleetwood Mac or something. Really
Exactly.
simple tune, but executed absolutely perfectly, every aspect of it. It's the sort of thing that's, yeah, okay, you think that's easy, you do it. It's like, because it's perfect. And also, I was thinking about disco records from the 70s, which
Oh,
at
yeah.
the time felt kind of mechanical, and
Right.
maybe a little soulless. And I remember thinking at the time that it sounds like machines. And
Yeah.
it's just a matter of perspective, because you hear all that stuff now and all you hear is people playing their asses off. It's really, really interesting,
Yeah.
the different perspective that time brings.
Yeah, especially some of that Giorgio Moroder stuff with Donna Summer, and
Hmm.
there was some really great stuff. But at the same time, we were so in the weeds with Gates of Delirium and Sound Chaser, Tales from Topographic.
Right.
We were so into that
Uh-huh.
that everything else was, you know, pedestrian.
Yeah. And it's easy to think at the time, and that some forms of music were inherently more, elevated in a kind of a snobbish way. But we should have been taking more cues from Zappa in that regard, because he had great affection for, everything across the board of as long as you were committed, you could play. He loved really stupid stuff,
Right,
but it just had to be executed with the right intent. And it's all about, what are you trying to get across with the song, and then execute that as well as you possibly can. And if everything sounded like the Gates of Delirium, then the Gates of Delirium itself would not be so amazing,
right.
because you
Yeah,
would be able to contrast it against, everything else that's going on. There only needs to be one Gates of Delirium.
right.
uh some people would say there didn't even need to be one, but of course we know better.
Right. Yeah, I love the juxtaposition with Frank because he would take something that was lowbrow, but he would put something in it that would elevate it and be that nobody would ever have dreamt of. I think
Yeah.
we often say, if you have something that's heavy text lyrically, you have to counterbalance it with something not as dense going the other
Yeah.
direction. So it was all, like a Calder mobile or something where it's just
Exactly. I mean, he said that to him, composition was just like a Caldermobile. It was a system of weights and balances, and figuring out what blob of stuff needs to go over here in order to keep this thing elevated on the other side.
right.
So yeah, he was very aware of all that stuff. But I also think that he was just, instinctively aware of that stuff. That's just the way he approached things. And I often think that because Frank was working in the popular music realm, that he caught a lot more grief. I accidentally muted myself.
That's right.
Because he was working in the popular music realm, he caught more grief for his lyrical content than he would have if he were a novelist.
Right.
Like, I don't think he was saying much that John Updike or somebody wasn't saying in their novels, but that was literary, and somehow Frank wasn't. It's all just about what you're being posed against, and
Yeah.
Frank was being judged against, you know pop stars who did everything right according
Right.
to whatever the standards were.
Yeah.
But I kind of think of Frank as just a provocative writer, in the same way that a lot of really celebrated novelists were. And I wish that he would be assessed more from that perspective.
Yeah, I think he liked things that just entertained him. He was quick to move on to various things, but it was like in the moment, what was entertaining? What was a concept that he could something that was topical at the time, whether it was something that a band member had done or said, or
Right.
a roadie had said about, jazz discharge party hats,
Right.
something,
Yeah, there was a part of him that just said this needs to be documented and celebrated, because this will never happen again.
which um, having that perversely being I think that came out like when I was a senior in high school, Man from Utopia. I love that just from the lyrical content. But then when I a few oh I don't know a decade later, two decades later, when you performed that at the Zappa's Universe, I thought I don't know in my lifetime that I'll ever see somebody sing and play that simultaneously. And I had the utmost respect when I saw. I was like, "You got to be shitting me! Somebody's."
That was at least a week of my life devoted to nothing but that, learning that. And the the peak moment of that song for me was because Frank was too ill to attend the Zappa's Universe concerts, but Tunis and Motts and Morgan and I were rehearsing as a quartet before we went to New York for the shows. We were rehearsing in Los Angeles, and Frank came to one of the rehearsals. So
Oh,
I was able to play Jazz Discharge, which actually was one of his requests. He had been in contact with Joel Foam, who was the conductor of the orchestra for that,
yeah,
and Frank had a short list of songs that he wanted to be performed at this thing, and one of them was Jazz Discharge Party Hats. So I took that as
yeah,
I was divinely it was my duty, it was my responsibility to do that.
yeah,
And every few years I'll brush up on it because on occasion I'll be called upon to play that thing.
yeah.
It's it was just seeing the smile on Frank's face while we were actually playing it live for him was the peak.
And at the holidays, it's great for the kids. They gather around and
Oh, it is, it's a family tradition.
that's right. They were sniffing the fudge and sniffing the glue.
Yeah, and the whole family like acts out all the stuff. It's great.
That's right. Yeah, I remember transcribing that, and I did it over multiple pages, but I don't think I ever got to the place where I could play it comfortably from beginning to end. But
Well, that's sick. You actually transcribed it
yeah,
prior to Vi's transcription being made available.
I to this day I never seen his transcription.
Oh, okay. Wow, cool.
I would love this because I'm sure mine was probably not the most economical way of playing it because it was a good.
Well, Steve's way is not necessarily economical either, but it was as every
Right.
instance of transcription in that thing was just designed to get us as close as humanly possible to expressing Frank's speech rhythms. Although he was speak singing, yeah, it's an exciting read for sure. But that is that's admirable that you tried your hand at it. I never got into actually doing those sort of transcriptions. Whenever I was learning Zappa stuff, I was just going directly from my ears to my fingers, and I bypassed the paper aspect.
Well, I think that there's now having many years of doing that kind of thing. I think that way is the best performance way.
Which was all I was ever concerned with, was just being able
Exactly.
to play
So
it.
for me, I never saw, am I ever going to have a need to do this? But by the same token, I was like, I just think that this is ridiculously crazy and fun to try. And it was
Well,
over.
yeah. And what's good about the transcription approach is that you end up with a document that can be of use to other people. I mean, you could say that my performance of something that I figured out by ear and learned how to play is of use in another way, but you can't read it as opposed to a transcription. And I remember when the Frank Zappa guitar book came out, and I would be listening to Shut Up and Play Your Guitar, all those different solos, and reading along in the book. That's an education. Actually being able to see a visual representation of all these insane groupings and all these crazy intervallic leaps, it really it helps break down the mystery and the kind of intimidation factor when you can actually see, all right, no, these are actual real life events that can be quantified,
Yeah.
and that's important. So it's a good thing that there are people like yourself who are willing to write that stuff down. I just never had the patience. I was always just wanting to be able to play it and then move on to the next thing.
There were times that I would sit down with that book and just put my guitar aside and just from the standpoint of trying to become a better reader, like put on Soup and Old Clothes or something like that, and just try to follow along or Packard Goose or whatever it might have been, just to see if I could track with it. and
Right.
understand what was happening rhythmically,
Well,
because I
well,
felt like
as long as you can tap your foot, you should always be able to know where you are on the
exactly.
page. But every once in a while, things get so crazy and leave you stranded by the side of the road.
There's a guy on YouTube. You may know him, Chonan Halsball.
Yeah, I just spoke to him on Friday, actually.
Oh my!
Uh,
I recently discovered some of his stuff, and he goes into great detail on like Pedro's Dowry and the Zappa chord Bible, and I'm like, wow, this
yeah,
is
yeah, no, yeah. He's way deep in the mines with his helmet on. Yeah, he's definitely uh, extremely it's valuable. He's
right.
it's great that he's doing that stuff.
Right. I think one topic that uh, everybody that's a fan of yours would love to uh, find out about is just your key to being so prolific, because
Hmm.
you've taken on a lot of, every different album has its flavor, and it's a unique, it's not like it's a, even though there's a through line, there's something very interesting and compelling about each recording that
Thank
has your
you.
sense of humor, and obviously your influences are intact while maintaining your own voice. But it's like, how does it start for you? I mean, are you constantly putting ideas down on your iPhone, or are you just recording little demos constantly and cataloging them? All of the above?
It's kind of all of the above, depending on schedule. Like a year like this year, where I've been on the road more often than I've been at home, which is this is the first year in a while that's been the case. That over half the year I've been away from home, um, and then at that point it becomes more of a challenge. But I also was less concerned this year about generating new stuff because I have this backlog of stuff in progress. When I made the last record, which came out early this year, which is called "The Thing That Knowledge Can't Eat," I worked on that during lockdown. So obviously I wasn't touring for since from March 2020 to July 2021. I was sitting at home, so that gave me a lot of time to work on a lot of music. And yeah, I do have hundreds of memos in the phone and a lot of Pro Tools sessions of stuff in progress. But this year, while I was on the road with Devin Townsend, I was spending a lot of time in the back of the bus and in dressing rooms working on mixes for like about 90 minutes of music that hasn't come out yet. So but I'm already, like, last night I woke up in the middle of the night with an idea for a melody that I needed to write down, possibly something that I want to try developing with Andy Partridge, because we've been discussing doing another collaboration, because we wrote an album together like already 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's generally, if I'm left alone and not distracted, there's a good chance that some melody or an idea for a weird sound combination or texture will occur to me, and it's a lot of them just get lost in the ether, and I'm kind of relaxed about that, because I know something else will come up. So it's, yeah, generating musical ideas, it always seems to me like it's endless. It's fun and exciting, and there's so many things that I haven't heard yet in life, and which is surprising to me, because I've heard thousands of songs, but I keep like imagining things. I've never heard anything quite like this. I wonder what this would be like, and that tends to be like the kicking off point for a new song, is if there's some aspect to it which is in some way new to me,
Right.
because I'm not interested in trying to recreate songs that I've done before. Every once in a while I'll think, like I did an album already coming up on 30 years ago called Boil That Dust Back, and there's a song on there called Cause of Breakfast, which is this
I remember
really
that.
down-tuned heavy thing. And every once in a while I think, boy, that was a really good song, and a lot of people like it. I should do more like it. But every time I approach a new song with the idea of, okay, this is going to be something else along those lines, it veers off into some other complete territory, just because I can't bear, apparently, to really blatantly repeat myself. Maybe sometimes when I'm improvising in a guitar solo, inevitably you'll play something that, even though I'm always trying when improvising not to do memorized licks or parrot anything that I've heard before, sometimes it just happens. But in terms of the composition, yeah, there's a flavor to my stuff. I tend to favor certain types of chord progressions and certain types of melody lines and stuff. And I think, when I was much younger, I was really beholden to Frank and the Beatles and XTC and stuff, and so that their influence is in there. But I think over time it's gotten processed and filtered to the point where hopefully it just sounds like me. But it's style is an interesting thing because I'm really trying not to repeat myself, and yet it still has a flavor that sounds like me. But that's just the way people work, I think.
I would think that what informs your musicality, at least this is an assumption, is that you must be an avid reader, because your mind is very fertile with the compositions, the names of these tunes. To my mind, don't seem to be throwaway titles. It seems like there's a sense of humor, but also a sense of this guy seems very intelligent and well-read and interested in a myriad of other things besides music, or in addition to music.
I appreciate that. I'm definitely not trying to trumpet my intellect or anything, but I especially when I was much younger, I read a lot.
Yeah.
And I do think I early on developed an appreciation for people who really knew how to use words well, because language is really fun and interesting and affords a lot of opportunity to say very specific things. And also you can paint pictures with word combinations in the same way that you can with musical combinations. So even just the sounds of words, ask John Anderson about that. Words are very fascinating, and I never thought that it made sense to limit oneself in terms of linguistic possibilities, even though I think in some ways it runs counter to a lot of people's expectations of how a rock and roll guitar player is supposed to talk or think or write. Because sometimes I get interested in trying to express very esoteric things with the words and the titles and all that stuff. But it's all just the taste that I developed early on. And I think also certain types of comedy also had a big impact on me in that regard, because as a young teenager, I was very into the Firesign Theater. I was very into Monty Python. And these were people who had spectacular command of the English language, and obviously a great deal of knowledge and things that they'd learned over the years, whether through formal education or just from living and being perceptive and being receptive to life. I think I appreciated early on the idea of people that weren't closed off to all of that kind of stimulus and knowledge. I thought it was laudable.
It's interesting to hear you say those things, because many times when I run into folks that are interested in Frank and some of the progressive stuff, it also, from the humor thing, the Python thing is also, or the sense of humor is equally. And I don't think the prog rock guys get enough credit for. There's a lot of humor, or a lot of cheeky.
Yeah, it's like people who don't think that Robert Fripp that has a sense of humor, or that's just
right.
The people who don't understand Robert Fripp.
Yeah, but
yeah.
Growing up in the Midwest, though, it was like a weird thing, because being a Python fan when you're a kid, a lot of kids aren't getting blessed are the cheesemakers. Or any Python thing that you want to quote, but it's a very, very specific taste. And I didn't find, growing up in Ohio, that there was a lot of us that were into that kind of stuff.
Oh, well, yeah, but they were there, though. It's just about unearthing them. And it's always it's a validating thing to realize, oh, I'm not the only one who's like staying up late at night watching these Python reruns on public TV, and it was gratifying in a way, almost stunning when Python started to become more popular, because I just thought they were the most esoteric, obscure thing for a while, not realizing that just by virtue of the fact that this thing was on television already meant that it was above ground to a certain degree. It's sort of the same way as Frank. It sort of felt like being in a secret club, and the challenge humanistically there is to accept membership in that club without being elitist about it, because it is possible to be kind of insufferable when you find yourself so passionate about a certain thing. But we've all seen enough memes now about some guy talking to his long-suffering girlfriend about some super esoteric aspect of a prog rock song or something. It's not the best way to make friends or maintain relationships. You have to still go on living life.
My wife now gets a kick out of the fact my stories about being a one and done serial dater, going out for the first time and finding that talking at ad nauseum about Pink Floyd, The Final Cut, or whatever it might have been, was not exactly great first date material. Or
unless you're really committed to being a serial dater and dating a lot of different people once.
Right, yeah. So it was not the smart, but I learned a lot about that process of what they now call active listening. It would have been better if I would have listened and cued into my date's interests, hobbies, and proclivities than my own.
True that, and that's just in life, not just in trying to get romance happening. It's being open to what people are saying and feeling is intrinsic to existing properly in humanity.
The one thing that I always thought was, and I don't think I have a really good beat on this, and it's probably a silly question, but during touring with Frank in the '88 tour, every show there was the secret word for the evening that was predicated on the sound check or something that happened the night before,
or something someone had eaten recently.
Right.
Well, that was just that was a major building block of Zappa's sort of body of work, was the idea of these just like concepts, zircon encrusted tweezers that are just amusing to him for it could just be because of the way the word sounds, or it could be because of what it represents in terms of the cosmology of the group. And one thing you'd have to say about Frank, he was not overly concerned with making every one of his gestures comprehensible to even anyone. It's like he was happy to work with private jokes, and that's something that does kind of foster a them or us type attitude, which I think in some ways I needed to, in 1996 when I stopped working with the Zappas for what ended up being like over 2 decades. I think in some ways it was important for me to lift myself out of that because Frank was proudly cynical, and I think cynicism as a life force can really only take you so far before it starts to limit you to possibilities. I understand being on your guard and being self-protective, but I also think that it can cause you to automatically jump to a negative conclusion. And I found at some point that I was personally enjoying life more when I imagined more positive outcomes, as opposed to just assuming that everything is horrible and going to be more horrible soon. It does. Then I'll grant you, there's a lot of reason to feel that way nowadays. But I think, as long as you're you have to be aware of what's happening in the world. But if as long as you're in a fortunate enough position to not be actually imminently under physical attack, that a positive outlook ultimately does more good for the world, because energy is a real thing, and everything you think, feel, and do puts a little bit of energy out in the world.
Yeah.
And I'm trying anyway to be on the side of good.
Yeah. It's attractive when you're younger, I think, to maybe that was some of the thing of with finding Frank's material so engaging is because he did seem cynical and guarded, and it was almost like a way of if you keep a chip on your shoulder and look at things cynically, uh, they can't possibly hurt. It's kind of like a shield to kind of
Yeah,
protect yourself.
but I also think that he used it constructively because he was able to turn that into music that was cathartic and entertaining and substantial.
Right.
So I don't think of him as somebody that, let's say if the internet had been happening
Right.
when Frank was 14, I don't think he would have spent all his time typing vitriol in message boards. I think he still would have wanted to express himself in a more constructive way.
Yeah.
But it's real easy to feel, geez, if only Frank was around now. I really do. I think often about God, how Frank would have responded to and used the advent of the internet, and I think it would have been really interesting.
Yeah, a lot of his predictions seemed, not everyone certainly, but a lot of them seemed to kind of bear weight. Especially him talking about companies manufacturing their own brands or their own uh, branches of entertainment.
Right. And how government itself is a branch of the entertainment industry,
Right.
and downloading and streaming and all this stuff that he was talking about, well before any of it was really made real. Yeah, he was definitely in touch with the zeitgeist on a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. The so right now you've got stuff that you're kind of sifting through to work to get you to the next
Mhm.
project that you're hoping to release in 2024.
Yeah, I think so. It's the thing that I'm dealing with at the moment is that I've generated this big lump of music that the majority of it is sort of residing in this really abstract instrumental realm, or very some of it is based on the very improvisational stuff that I've then orchestrated, as opposed to sitting down saying I'm going to write a song right now, because music is so fun and there's so many ways of generating it that it's very easy for me, and especially when I was just sitting at home for that year and a half, to just experiment, especially once I had like home recording capabilities, which up until lockdown I really didn't have exhaustive recording capabilities, but now I'm able to see a song from start to finish here at home, and I had a lot of material from the past many years, some of which was improvisationally based, and then I started getting into editing and manipulating and orchestrating that stuff. And so I ended up with a lot of material, but some of it is, about half of it is compositionally based, and about half of it is decorated improvisation stuff. And but a large measure of it is abstract. And if I was to just put it out as one thing, I think that the material would be fighting against each other. So in order to make satisfying albums, I'm feeling like I need to write and record some more easily graspable structural stuff, stuff where you can say, oh, this is a verse, this is a chorus, and also because I love pop music songwriting, and I still think that the Beatles are amazing, and with what they were able to do in a 2.5 minute format remains inspiring. So I still like to try my hand at that kind of stuff, and I think again, a huge part of composition is just balance and contrast. If everything sounds the same, then any single one of these pieces of music has their effectiveness reduced, because the listener can get fatigued by hearing too much of the same type of thing. But if you balance an 8-minute insane adventure instrumentally with a 3-minute very accessible song, that people can understand where the verses are,
Right.
then I think both things benefit as a result.
Yeah.
And that's, obviously that's a Frank thing, but it's also a Beatles thing. If you look at the way, even though it was rare that they got really abstract, basically Revolution 9 and one or two other things slightly. Stylistically, their records were all over the place, and that made a huge impression on me early on.
Yeah.
So the music that I'm working on now, it's 90 minutes of stuff that I think could basically form the basis of 4 different albums. It's like sourdough starter.
Yeah, right.
Or my wife is she's into making kefir, so now I
Oh,
think in terms of
oh,
kefir.
I've seen that like somewhere, Trader Joe's. Or what is kefir?
It's sort of a yogurt type based beverage. It's and you have to like prove it for days at a time and stuff. It's really good, and it's really good for you, probiotics.
Yeah. Well, the collaboration with Andy Partridge to me makes perfect sense because it's the two of you definitely have that a lot of the same sensibilities, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was interesting to find out because I first heard XTC around about 80, 82, 83, and then this was pre-internet, and so the way you found out about bands was looking for magazines.
Right.
I was always on the lookout for any magazine that had an XTC article.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, oh, wow. So okay, yeah, obviously he was obsessed with the Beatles and also psychedelic pop and the Monkees and Captain Beefheart. And I'm like, yeah, and he recorded with the Residents and all this weird shit that I liked, and so he too, like me, had a great appreciation for, on the one hand, a very concise, constructed pop statement, and on the other hand, just heading as far out into the stratosphere as you could. Like he's into Charlie Parker and Syd Barrett and Mickey Dolenz. He
Yeah.
covered the gamut.
Yeah, and his favorite, his Desert Island disc is Tony Williams' Lifetime, which
Yeah,
I don't know that
that's
you would pick up on that by, but then
yeah.
you kind of go, oh, well, maybe I get it. Yeah, okay.
Well, I mean, a lot of times it's just attitudinal, because
Yeah.
like that Emergency record is just so grimy and willful. It's like there's you can't mistake the vibe that's going on there. Even as down to the horrific sound quality, it all seems like
Right. Yeah.
it's like this is a window and you're only allowed a glimpse, so it can't be too high def into this particular attitude and this particular approach, and so I think that Andy just has an innate appreciation for that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I wouldn't call it a disdain, but he wanted to steer away from the perhaps British guitar hero pentatonic leanings, the Ernie things
Yeah, Ernie.
referred to, uh,
Uh-huh.
which made for really interesting the the sounds that they would come up with as far as when there were and
Yeah, I think he was more
colossal.
into it. He was more into glam rock, than he was into, pub rock, maybe.
Exactly, more Mark Boland than Peter Green or what.
Yeah, it depends. I'm sure he appreciated Peter Green, but in terms of the stuff that I think really sparked his imagination, yeah, I think he was into, you know, maybe a slightly more cosmically influenced thing, but at the same time, he was also, uh, provincial sounds like a negative thing, but he was all, at the same time he was reaching for the stars. He was also still this small town guy,
Yeah,
and it resulted in a really unique perspective, but also just, he developed a performance style early on that is just electrifying, and he's such a good musician. And if you see the early XTC live performances, and and he always for obvious reasons, because he hasn't played live in 40 years, felt that he was ill suited for live performance. But man, he was a monster in terms of his
Yeah.
ability to execute really complex stuff on guitar, and be a very powerful, intense vocal presence at the same time, and his rhythmic delivery of those melody lines is just, you get the impression of somebody who's about to explode, which is probably
Right.
true.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he determined that it wasn't healthy for him to continue, because he had to put himself into a place to be able to do that. And
It's quite emotive on
that can be
stage.
very exhausting.
Yeah, some of those performances, he seems like he was leaving it all out there, which I could see that, plus just the rigors of there's a lot of things working against you. The road
It
is not,
takes it takes a toll,
yes,
and you have to decide whether you're going to make space in your life to accommodate that toll.
yeah,
In my case, I love playing live so much. I get so much nourishment from the direct contact with an audience, and the stuff that I do musically can get so abstract and so idiosyncratic, and concerned with my own, the weird way that I process things, that it could get, I could easily have turned into a hermit. I really like staying home. I really like not interacting. It's like I'm very cool being by myself, but it's healthy for me to interact with people, and it's validating to get out and play for people and have them receive it so well.
yeah,
And then as time goes on, and I feel like I'm getting better as a performer in some ways, and able to execute intricate things in a way that's not just correct, but also has some emotional content behind it. You really feel like you're sharing moments with an audience that are important, and especially when I remember back to concerts that I saw when I was very young as a teenager. It's almost hard to imagine another experience like a really good concert. It really does something, and it leaves an impression. When you think back on your life, there's some of the most vital and bright moments with like no negative connotations are concerts you've seen.
yeah,
So it's like it's I consider it really important to do the job well when I'm on a stage, because I feel like there's always the potential to create that kind of moment for somebody in the room.
yeah,
It's like mathematically there's a pretty good chance that a show that I've been involved with over the last many years has been that for somebody, and that's sacred.
yeah. And then from a personal thing, the through line that for the folks that I've been blessed to sit down with, yourself included, uh, the thing that I'm hit with constantly is the human part of it. Like when you run into musicians that you haven't played with for a while, but maybe you toured with for a season, because a lot of this is seasonal. You'll spend a season with this group of people, whatever. You get together, you very seldom talk about the great gig that happened, but it's more of a human thing. When you're on the road with one another, you're not always talking about music gear or music related things. It's a broader human thing, what people are going through, the pain,
Yep.
loss of a family member, the pain of divorce, the pain of financial. It's a very human thing, and
Yeah.
bonds connect you for your entire life, and that seems to be the through line for everybody that I've talked to, is that those are the connections that they value the most of their colleagues, and the time that they've spent on the road making music together in the studios. It's a probably the richest form of musical currency. Those.
Well, there's no doubt that families are formed out of these ragtag bunches of
Yeah,
musicians and technicians that are thrown together on the road. And yeah, it's very human. It's like you might discuss music for 2 minutes after you get off stage, just to talk about what just went wrong, but the rest of the time you're just living with one another. And it's been instructive working with Devin Townsend in that regard, because he too is somebody who might tend toward a hermit-like existence and really likes just being home and gardening. If he's going to force himself to go out on the road, he has to make sure, yes, that people are very capable, but just as important, if not more so, is the hang. He needs to make sure that he's surrounding himself with personalities and energies that he can vibe with, because 2 months on a bus is a really long time, and a very intense, compacted living lifestyle. It's everybody's in each other's stuff. There's very little in the way of privacy, so it can be profoundly exhausting if you're very sensitive,
Right.
And but at the same time, it can also be the most nourishing thing to have access to all this other stuff, all these other people and their lives and their stories, and that also goes for people in the audience. Even if you don't say a single word to one another, there's still an exchange of energy that you can feel, and it's important in a life to take in stimuli, to stay open and make sure your worldview isn't too myopic. It isn't just like this, my block is the world.
Right. Yeah. It seems like the seasoned band leaders have their finger on the pulse of the fragile ecosystem that is touring. How
Yes.
you could be a miraculous musician, but if your personality is not in harmony, and it's easy to suss out, I think.
Well, it's just like, it's hard enough, being in a different town every day, having to mount a show from scratch every day, driving through the night, hoping that you can find some good food somewhere. There are already enough challenges without the band leader being an asshole. And if the band leader is a perceptive, in touch person, the way Devin is, or Satriani or Vi, or it's like, you have to. It is a fragile ecosystem, and it's a delicate thing. You can, if you fly off the handle too readily, you're just poisoning the environment constantly, and that's not good for anybody, including the audiences, because it's going to negatively impact the music, because there's going to be like a dark cloud hanging over everything. You want the thing to be joyous,
Yeah.
Even if you're playing really dark, insane, brutal metal or something, there has to be a nugget of joy at the core of the thing.
Yeah. I would think, and even in the heaviest cases of music, there's got to, to the audience, they're perceiving the heaviness, but I would think that there's probably got to be a lightheartedness off stage or on the road. I can't imagine sustaining that kind of metal kind of.
No, you can't, and from having worked with Death Clock, and now Devin being in that world, although obviously his musical interests are multivariate, they're all over the place, but a lot of his following remains in the metal world. Yeah, everybody's just like really fun goofballs. It's great. You never get the feeling like you're in danger. And I when I think back to particularly a tour that Death Clock did with Mastodon in 2009, I guess. Just so joyful, and the vibe in the audience was so wonderful. Even when the whole building was just being roiled with mosh pits and stuff, it was just like a celebration in a way that felt really healthy.
Yeah, it seems like Brent and Bill probably have a good sense of humor and
Oh yeah,
the frivolity.
Definitely. They were the most. That tour was so much fun. God, I loved touring with those guys.
Yeah, the tour that will happen next year with Joe and Steve, the first time they're going to be co-headlining. Will there be two separate bands, or will there be or will you be performing
Uh,
with Steve and Joe?
I'm not on the tour, but I should think, because I haven't played with Joe for 3-4 years, and I haven't played in Steve's band for over 20.
Yeah, I
So,
don't get a good. I can't keep track. I just assume I would have assumed that. Yeah, I think the last time I saw Joe, you were playing with Joe, so maybe that was.
yeah, I mean, I played with Joe for 9 years, from 2010 to 2019, which is that's a long run in his bands. He tends to go through guys more quickly. So there there was a there was basically a conflict when I started working with Devin,
Oh,
and
okay.
I had co-produced that album Empath, and was just getting really involved in his world.
Oh, gotcha.
So at a certain point, it just made sense for Joe to make a change. And also, I think, just from the standpoint of a band leader, I totally understand the desire to get different flavors in your band, because I was playing keyboard and guitar in Joe's band for many tours, and that helps to define the sonic thumbprint of the thing.
Right.
And the guy that he's got now is a guy named Ray Thistlethwaite, who's done a bunch of recording with the band Knower, who are
Yeah.
unbelievable, and he's just an insanely talented keyboardist and guitarist and vocalist and writer.
Yeah.
So he's an incredible addition to Satriani's thing. And Steve's been, he's headed off in other directions a long time ago, although we still maintain contact. And he actually played on a song on my last record, the one that came out earlier this year, a song called Celery, that Steve just like totally shot into the stratosphere with his
Yeah.
soloing. He just killed it. It's amazing.
Did you produce
Um,
a video for that by any chance? Because I
what's
remember,
that?
did you produce a video for Celery by?
Yeah, there's this filmmaker in Finland named Mikko Kainonen that did videos for 5 of the songs on my last record, and actually strung them together into a short film called
Yes.
the Complete Adventures of the Unrelated Sound Guy, which people should really check out. It's a wonderful thing he achieved. He made a beautiful movie, but also he broke out parts of that short film as independent videos, and he
Yeah.
put out a video for Celery that had like uh, a contestant from and I think an award winner from the Finnish air guitar competition.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So this guy was just like insanely miming Steve's soloing, and it's really fun to watch. But there's also just a bunch of absurd, very Python-esque. Actually, the
Yeah.
Miko is heavily influenced by Python.
It had some
Um,
whimsy, like Wes Anderson kind of vibe to it.
yeah, with the way things are framed and stuff, for sure. It's great. He did great stuff, and he did me a huge favor, actually, because the whole concept was his, and he wanted to do a video for one of my songs, and I happened to be in the process of making that album. So I just sent him like a bunch of songs that I was working on, and he was like, "Can I do like 5 of them?" and then I suggested, well, then you should make a short film. You should find a way to string them all together conceptually somehow, and that sparked him off into making this little movie, which was really fun.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, we kind of went off on a tangent, but yeah, Vi and I are in fairly frequent contact, and in fact, so sweetly, he is a subscriber to my Patreon, so
Yeah.
he like continues to support me in a very real concrete way every month, and I think that's very lovely of him. It's very sweet.
Love that he has for you, that he's displayed in interviews, and the way that he talks about you is with such admiration, but more importantly, like somebody that is his a dear brother for life. I mean,
Well, I
he.
mean, especially when I first got in that band, it was the band with Mike Mangini and Philip
Yeah,
Bino, and then
I
and
saw
then
that. I saw the G3 tour where you came out with.
the
Uh,
big old hat. Yeah, that was
the
that was the big hat period. But there was a feeling in that band that was just so family and really, really like profoundly strong, and to be able to spend that much time with Steve after we had both, we were both born in Long Island, we both went through the whole Zappa thing, and every kind of impact that playing with Frank has on your life,
oh yeah.
across the gamut, because there are aspects that are, really need to be processed and contended with, I think Steve felt that even harder because he was much younger. Like I was 25 when I got in Frank's band. I think Steve started sending him transcriptions when he was like 17 and started playing in the band when he was 19. So he was like still just like a blob of ectoplasm at that point. So it really has a major impact to suddenly be thrust into Frank's world and mindset. So when we were in the band together, when Steve's band, we explicitly understood so much and shared so much of that. And so it's interesting. And there's also just something about Long Island and guitar players which I don't even understand.
You, Joe, Steve, John Petrucci, yeah, my God.
Warren Cucurullo, there's like
Yeah.
a lot of guys, and it's funny, Satriani, so it's weird and interesting. Something in the water.
Were you far from Carl Place, or were you aware of where it was or where it is?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think all my conscious memories of Long Island are from Plainview, but I've lived in Carl Place for like a very when I was like one.
Oh, wow.
So I was within blocks possibly of both Vai and Satriani when it was still forming consciousness. So maybe something came floating through in the ether that landed in my crib.
I was always curious if like Bill Westcott was around, if he's still around, if he knew what Steve and Joe were up to, because he was such an character in their lives.
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's
always wondered.
I have no insight, but yeah, it's a good question.
Because they both cite him as somebody. It's funny the people that we run into when we're really young, and so if you have somebody that you can go to with, I guess in Steve's case, he went to Bill with West Side Story and said, "I love this. Why do I love this?" And he said, there's this Lydian thing that's happening here, and he's like, Lydian. It's like, okay, sit down. Okay.
Start to crack the code.
Yeah, to have somebody in your life at that age, and I think the guys also like picked up things like bigger esoteric things like, what does this mode mean to you? Develop a relationship with the mode, and rather than just getting it under your fingers, what does it mean to you compositionally?
How does it feel exactly? What is this telling you emotionally? What stories can you tell with this sound world?
To have that in your formulative years is just, that's gold. I can see why those guys would name check him as being a huge influence as they were coming up.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's offering keys to the kingdom in a way that just learning a solo off of I don't want to name any particular band because I don't mean to denigrate them, but just some popular hard rock record of the day. That's great. You want to learn solos off of records. You learn a lot that way, but it's also really good to have influences in your life that can show you the vista beyond.
Yeah, there's two songs that I heard from Frank very early on, and I was just in my teens, but absolutely devastated me. Like, it was different, but it was like hearing "Till I Die" by the Beach Boys. It was that kind of feeling, but it was Zoot Allures and Watermelon and Easter Hay. I have
what was the first one?
Zoot Allures.
So, yeah.
Then Watermelon and Easter Hay. I heard that and I had no connection to those, but it just floored me. I was just devastated by those two. So I thought, where does this come from?
Right. That comes from Frank's understanding of the way certain notes set against certain harmonic climates can make a person feel. And he could have spent all of his time fashioning heartbreakingly beautiful stuff like that, but I think that he felt that it was potentially manipulative, in the way that certain Spielberg films really know how to pull heartstrings in an almost scientific way. Frank was able to do that with music and could have chosen to do it. The thing that really brought that home to me was much later when he'd already been diagnosed, and he was spending more time, just all of his time at home working on recording projects. And I came over because whenever he would allow me, I would go over to the house to listen to music in progress. And he played me an early version of Light from Civilization Phase 3, which in the final cut is an 18-minute piece. And he played me an earlier 24-minute cut that had just these rhapsodic, amazing, gorgeous, heartbreakingly beautiful passages. And when it was over, I was like shook, and I said to him, Frank, I swear, parts of that are like the most beautiful music I've ever heard from you. And he was like disdainful of it, and he like goes, yeah, I know, I got to put some more ugly stuff in there. He was suspicious of that stuff because he understood it, intellectually. He understood the building blocks that the reason why people respond to it that way. But I don't think you should be too sparing with that stuff, because people need that kind of beauty in their life. But I think in a journalistic way, he felt like he needed to be a more accurate reflection of how ugly things can get. I guess I'm clearly more idealistic than he was, and I'm inspired by, more inspired by, say, Coltrane, who had this vision of a world beyond, and felt that he needed to show people a way into that. Like that's maybe a way that we can get through this together, rather than just reveling in how horrible it is. I think it's a day-to-day thing, right? It's about, you open your eyes in the morning, and how hopeful are you? How many reasons do you have to get out of bed? And I think the more, idealism maybe is naive, but anything that gets you out of bed.
Yeah. I love the fact that towards the very end that he was having, I think it was called like Thursday night margarita night or pina colada nights, and he was having the chieftains and
those were Friday. The Friday, the soirees.
Yeah, Johnny Guitar Watson would come by, or somebody. I love the idea that as he knows he's got a limited time, he's reaching out.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't his thing. Maybe it was Gail's thing. I don't know who.
It was Gail's thing. It was the tech crew. Everybody was just sort of like, he kind of got reluctantly pulled into it, because the crew on their own, the studio staff, started doing the margarita thing on Fridays, and reluctantly pulled Frank into it. And then at a certain point, he saw the value. And man, I was there the night that the Chieftains and Johnny Guitar and Terry Bozzio were there, and there was a beautiful moment where Johnny Guitar sat down at Frank's extended grand piano with the extra bass octave, and he just started improvising this unbelievable stuff on the piano and vocally. And it was there. I was standing there, Terry Bozzio was standing there, and I think one other person. And he just did this recital for like 10 minutes that was mind-blowing. And Terry and I are just looking at each other, shaking our heads. And then when it was done, he finishes with a flourish, and he spins around and smiles at us. And Terry Bozzio, he goes, God, man, Johnny, I always knew you were a great guitar player. And before he was even able to finish the sentence, Johnny just goes, I hear you. It was beautiful. It was perfect.
I just think that's such a fitting thing to have for Frank, because there was so many people that loved him, and he may not be able to maintain relationships with all the people that he had worked with, but it's just beautiful to hear that you were still in the mix, and Terry, and I don't know if anybody else.
Yeah, no, he became more of a, he allowed some of the human machinery to come out. he allowed himself to behave more from the heart and to feel things that way. And yeah, you're right, it was beautiful. But he was still him. And it was funny, Joe Travers reminded me a couple of weeks ago of one time when he and I were over to the house, because Frank took an interest when Dweezil and Ahmet started playing live with Z, and Travers was the drummer in that band. So even though Joe didn't get to play with Frank, Frank did get to hear Joe play and thought he was fantastic. And I don't doubt for a second that if Frank had hung out for a while, that Joe would have ended up playing with him. There's no question about it. But so Joe and I were over at Frank's, and it was, you know, later in his life, and I had put out my first record, which was Hat. Yeah. And you know, that album was highly indebted to Frank, and I was able to give him a copy. And the next time I went over to the house, you know, I saw David Dondorf, who was one of the staff. He saw me at the front door, and the first thing he said was, "Wow, Frank really likes your album." I was like, "What? You kidding me?" And I you know, I went in, and Frank was sitting there, and this was one of the Friday night hangs. And so he was sitting in his chair in the basement and surrounded by people. And then when I came in the room, he like interrupted the conversation he was having to look me in the eyes and say, "Your album is great." And that, you know, that it's unbelievable. You know, it's like I could have stopped then. I was all right. I'll you know, go get a job in the mailroom. I'm good. And then he started talking about it in interviews, and I heard a radio interview where it was a call-in radio show, and somebody said, have you heard anything good musically lately? What should I be checking out? And he goes, "Listen to Mike Keneally's album Hat." And I was like, it's outrageous. So the next time I went over there, I was there with Travers, and he reminded me of this the other day. As we were leaving that night, I got a little effusive, and I'm like, "Frank, I got to tell you, I really appreciate you, you know, what you've been saying about the record, and just like everything, everything you've meant to me and all this stuff." You know, because I was aware that time was running out, and not that many more opportunities to say this kind of thing. And Frank's response to that was, "Just calm down there, boy."
Perfectly told, Frank. Yeah.
Yep. Because I was getting overwhelmed, you know.
Yeah. My daughter always asked when she was very little. She's 26 now. She would always ask me to play the apple pie song. Apple pie.
That's very sweet.
She loved hearing that. Didn't know anything about the other tracks, but she just loved hearing.
That's great. That makes me happy.
Yeah. Well, man, this has been amazing, Mike. Always been a huge hero. You were incredibly generous with your time back in the late 90s when your band played at Sudsy Malone's in Cincinnati.
Mm.
And I think you may have played Cause Breakfast at that show.
I probably did. That has been a staple of the live show and still is, you know.
Yeah, but I got to chat with you for a minute way back when, and you were always the, you know, it's that thing, don't meet your heroes, but in this case, yeah, you've been everything that I would hope for as a hero. So thanks, man.
Oh, geez, thank you. I really appreciate that. And the goal is to get out on the road more with Beer for Dolphins. So I'm hopeful that you know, you'll be able to come see us play Cause of Breakfast again pretty soon.
Really look forward to it.
Thank you so much for everything. This was so much fun, John, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Guitar Hang Podcast. Interviews with noteworthy guitar players from around the world. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications to stay updated on our latest episodes.